Welcome to Mr. Rodman's Chapter 6, Top 12 Highlights from the chapter on the Magleby text on interest groups. And today we're going to take you through the top 12 highlights from this chapter. Let's start off with number 1. The founders and framers believed that pluralism was going to cure the mischiefs of factions. They knew that they would never get rid of them entirely, but the important piece here was that they could control them, and they could control them through pluralism. A national, state, and local government with multiple branches, that no one could control every branch of every level of government. And that was the way it was designed to keep those factions in check. Factions, what we know today as interest groups. Number 2, the types of interest groups we have, we've talked about in class. There are social movements, there's economic interest groups, the ideological ones, the public interest, foreign policy and public sector. The social movements, things like civil rights or women's rights. Economic, those are focused around business and trade. Ideological, those are more single issue groups. Those serving the public interest, something such as seatbelt safety or climate change. The foreign policy issues of interest groups would be around foreign governments or foreign policy issues around other governments and human rights, that kind of thing. And then public sector, other governments within the United States government, such as cities, counties, states that are going to be lobbying on behalf of their governments locally. Or statewide. Number 3, lobbying is this idea of advocating on behalf of an interest group. So a lobbyist is a person who's going to be doing this. They're going to do this in a number of ways, and that's what we're going to talk about in this chapter. But think of it in terms of what they can do to help get government on their side and to focus on their policy agenda. Number 4, litigation is essentially one way to bring about that change, to do it through filing a lawsuit. And the best example of this is in Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. The NAACP basically filed a lawsuit. The lawyer, the attorney, Thurgood Marshall, who would become a justice on the court, filing on behalf of Brown to try and force the government to focus on ending segregation in public schools. And this obviously was successful. So that's the way litigation is used, but we also see a lot of other options. The Amicus curiae briefs, or the friend of the court briefs, that are basically filed on behalf of one side in a case, is basically their opportunity to basically weigh in on an issue and get the bragging rights if they are on the winning side of that particular case, to give them some bona fides as to, hey, we supported this and their legal efforts, and they were successful in doing so. But interest groups, we see a lot of other ways that they can influence the policy agenda and influence government today. They can form a PAC, they can donate money, they can form a SuperPAC today to support candidates. And they can also urge their members to donate money to individual campaigns and to PACs, super PACs, obviously within contribution limits, but they can also donate personally as lobbyists to different campaigns. And all of this within the legal confines of federal election campaign laws. What they cannot do, though, however, is to give money directly to an elected official, their staff, or members of the court. This would be bribery, and it is very illegal. And those accused of corruption and found guilty can be either sent to prison, obviously removed from office, and many unfortunately, many public officials, this has happened. Now, the overwhelming majority of interest groups and people serving public office, this obviously hasn't happened to, but the idea there is that it does happen, and it has happened on occasion, and unfortunately too often than we would like it to happen, but it does happen. The revolving door we talked about in class, but government officials basically are going back and forth between the business world and government, influencing rules and regulations that they in the industry might be ultimately impacted by if they are leaving the government sector in order to go into private sector again, and obviously vice versa, back into the government sector to influence that regulation. So there is a lot of overlap between an individual who's a part of the revolving door, moving in and out, basically impacting government regulation, and then also benefiting from that when they're back in the business world. So we see that revolving door happening quite frequently when government officials are offered jobs to go into the private sector and then come back again through that revolving door to influence government regulation. Interest groups can work inside and outside the government. I mentioned this in terms of the campaigning they do outside, and there are some other aspects that interest groups also can influence this. They develop relationships. Obviously, those iron triangles and issue networks I'll talk about in a minute, but the relationships are so important to an interest group because that's essentially why government officials are hired to be members of interest groups, is basically because of the contacts they have within government. They can also support campaigns or issues they care about, obviously support those issues and activate their members to support those issues. And that's where we get to the outside aspects of an interest group. How can they influence government outside of government? They can activate their members. Hey, write, call, email, call your congressman today. Tell them not to mess with your Social Security. That's the type of thing that can get people very activated. It's something that's easy. They can do it quickly. They can call and spend 2 minutes on the phone and basically make their voice heard. Multiply that by millions of members or hundreds of thousands of members that are calling and emailing members of Congress, and that can have a significant impact. We talked about litigation and Amicus curiae briefs that can be filed outside of government in terms of applying that pressure. And then they're going to use the media to gain that attention, trying to get the media to focus on stories related to this topic or related to their issues or the policy agenda in order to keep that pressure on government to bring about change or to not do something that the interest group would not want government to take action on. The difference between iron triangles and issue networks we also discussed in class, but I want to reiterate here. Iron triangles are about strong relationships. There's a much more formal arrangement going on. It lasts a lot longer than an issue network. An issue network is for a shorter period of time, and having that less formal arrangement, it disappears after the issue has basically been resolved or taken care of, or they've done something related to it. An iron triangle lasts over many issues and many policies and issues that may come up. So that's the big difference between iron triangles and issue networks. In terms of the type of information lobbyists can give, and let me reiterate here, a candidate for running for Congress, the most important thing you can give them is money, campaign cash, within the legal limits, of course. But to a member of Congress, the most important tool you can give to a member of Congress is information, and that comes in two ways: substantive information and political information. Substantive being the types of information on a particular policy or issue that will help them become more of an expert on that particular topic. Members of Congress cannot be experts on all of the issues that they cover. They do tend to specify particular areas that they are specialists in. Especially on the House side. In the Senate, they're kind of a jack of all trades and have to be experts on a lot of issues. So they don't have the staff to become experts and delve deeply into a lot of those issues. And that's where interest groups can really help with providing that substantive information. That's a valuable resource for members of Congress. And obviously, if they're providing bad information, they're never going to be trusted again. That interest group and that particular lobbyist will never be trusted by that member of Congress. And many times they'll be blacklisted, and so that other members of Congress won't trust them either because they've talked to members that have had a bad experience. So it's very important that they provide good information, solid information, and they can really gain trust and build that relationship, ultimately building that iron triangle through that relationship. Political information that they can provide: hey, Mr. Congressman, did you know that 86% of the people back in your district support this issue and would definitely see you as a leader in this area if you were to support it? Those political cues are really important to a member of Congress because they can't go out and get that kind of information. It would cost a lot of money for them to do that, and they can't do that on every issue. But getting that information from an interest group can be very valuable, and they will see that as a very valued resource to not just their candidacy in terms of running for re-election, but also to that member in terms of trying to be that thought leader in this particular area, or really try and gain policy expertise in that area. Again, it bears repeating that a candidate is looking for money in terms of the most valuable resource. But when you're a member of Congress, it's information that is valuable there, and that's going to be a valuable resource. And ultimately building that iron triangle. In terms of lobbyists working for interest groups, what can they contribute to candidates and parties? They form super PACs now. The PACs have been kind of the way that they've been going about it. Business obviously having a lot of money to donate to that. We see over 4,000 PACs that are registered with the government today as a political action committee. They mobilize their members through that outside strategy. They spend money separately from campaign contributions, and we see that through super PACs and 527s. They do a lot of that in that particular area, and that's really how they gain ground in gaining the members' trust in Congress. How do we regulate these groups is the last area I want to cover, and that is that they are protected by the First Amendment. They do have the freedom of speech and the freedom to organize. There was an initial law in 1946 that basically established the definition of a lobbyist. Other than that, it did little in terms of accomplishing much. In 1978, with all of the Watergate scandal, there was more disclosure that was instituted, and we started to see some of the revolving door regulations. They really didn't do a whole lot to define that area. In 1995, after a lot of scandal, we broadened the definition of lobbyists to require them to report 2 times a year in terms of what role that they play with an interest group. But other than that, there wasn't a whole lot of enforcement, and that led to a lot of the Jack Abramoff stuff we talked about. Remember, tax-exempt groups can't lobby Congress. They can have a political arm, a political action committee, that can push for this, and they're going to push the envelope as far as they can to make that happen. But ultimately, the interest groups do what they do, and that's providing that information, and obviously to campaigns providing the money and the resources to get those people elected that support their causes. The Honest Leadership and Open Government Act in 2007 really came about as a result of all of the campaign finance problems and the issues of the Jack Abramoff scandal and other scandals along the way that really tightened gifts from lobbyists to members of Congress and their staffs. It mandated more disclosure, increasing the waiting period, and lengthened that period in which a member of Congress could go and lobby on behalf of an interest group to the members that they were friends with. So that did change the game in terms of the timing. But in terms of members of Congress going to interest groups and their staffs going to interest groups, we still see the same thing happening today. There's not a whole lot of change there. So I hope this helped in terms of the top 12 highlights from Chapter 6 on interest groups. But remember, money is key, information is key, in that order, money for a candidate, information for a member, and those are the top 12 highlights. If you have questions, please make sure you contact me, and we hope this helped and provided a valuable resource today.